So today's discussion is going to be a little bit challenging. So I challenge you to listen because Walt Whitman is largely considered to be America's best and most beloved poet. Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson usually are considered to be America's laureate, their premier poet. So let's get started. I want to give you a little roadmap to tell you sort of what we're going to do today. I would like to give you a brief introduction to Whitman and Transcendentalism. But why? Because Transcendentalism and Walt Whitman are cornerstones to an American education. Not only are they vital to understanding American culture and American literature, however, many other standardized tests include Whitman. And so you need to be able to familiarize yourself with the poet. After we discuss Whitman, I'm going to analyze a few poems for you, and we'll take a few questions and have fun. Finally, I want to show you how to take an abstract idea, something abstract like a poem, for example, and write about it in a concrete fashion. So with the remaining amount of time, I will show you how to respond to a question, not just about Whitman, but about abstract concepts. So if on the PSAT or the ACT, you are asked to write a response about an abstract poem, movie, painting, concept, you will be better equipped to attack the test, okay? Hey, Joanna, I have another one of my students pop up. So let's get started with Walt Whitman. Here's Walt Whitman. This is America's premier male poet, Walt Whitman. Now, a couple of things I want you to know about Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman was totally inclusive. What do I mean? He believed that poetry was not something that only English teachers understood or enjoyed. He believed poetry should be for every man and woman. Okay? This is important. He believed that poetry was something that naturally occurred in all cultures. So Whitman wanted to record that. Whitman wanted to write down these poems that reflected a uniquely American way of life. Why is America unique? Well, during the 19th century, despite a civil war, despite being invaded by the British, we still overcame and became a Western power. Why? Because we're inclusive. America at its best includes all races. Whitman loved this. He called America the greatest poem because we're made up of many different cultures, religions, languages, and people. Okay, the melting pot, indeed. So, next, to understand Whitman and to understand Transcendentalism, let's see if I can spell it. Oh, there it is. Transcendentalism. Understanding Transcendentalism is a very vital part to an American education. Whitman and the Transcendental movement, let's time out and look at the word. Trans, meaning across. Transcend, meaning above. Okay, so the philosophy is this, that we are all interconnected by nature. In the Western Christian tradition, I should say, all power comes from God. In the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, and the Muslim faith, all power comes from God. However, Transcendentalism, which has its relations to Buddhism and Tao, claim that the God is actually the great web of life. So rather than God being this Zeus figure that just sits up in heaven and throws lightning bolts at people when he's bored, instead, they have a different concept of God and eternity, and God is, in fact, this great connection between all living creatures. Okay? That introduction is mandatory to understand Whitman's poems. When you consider the fact that his poems are about the interconnected nature of all life, you can understand his poems. So let's start. There's Whitman again, very handsome man, very nice beard. Let's begin. I think I Hear America Singing is a wonderful poem to start on our inauguration week. If you don't know, tomorrow is Inauguration Day. So we're very happy in America, day to celebrate. I hear America singing. I hear America singing let's start again. I hear America singing the very carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be, blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam. The mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work. The boatman sings what belongs to him in the boat, and the deckhand singing on the steamboat deck. What are we doing here? Time out. Sometimes when you read abstract poetry or look at an abstract painting, you can enjoy it without understanding its meaning. The first thing I notice in this poem is its natural song qualities. I told you, Whitman believed that Americans should all enjoy poetry. It was not some secret language, this flowing poetry. That, students, is called free verse, and never forget it. Free verse poetry is poetry that does not have a regular rhyme or meter. There's no regular rhythm. Why? Because the speech of Americans is oftentimes varied. Americans do not speak usually in poetic form. So Whitman's writing takes on the characteristics of American speech. Why? To include everyone. Like who? The mechanics, the carpenters, the masons, the boatmen, the deckhand. Normally, these people are not celebrated. We usually celebrate the rich, the famous, politicians. However, here Whitman celebrates all Americans. And what do these Americans have in common? They are creators, they are builders, they are fixers, mechanics, carpenters. A mason is a man or a woman who builds with bricks. They're edifying our country, making it stronger. I'll keep going. The shoemaker sings as he sits on his bench. The hatter singing as he stands. The woodcutter song, the plowboy on his way in the morning, or at noon, intermission, or at sundown. The delicious singing of the mother, or of the young wife at work, or of the girl sewing and washing. Each singing what belongs to him or her and to none else. That day, the day, what belongs to the day. At night, a party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths, their strong, melodious songs. Beautiful poem. Let's talk about this second stanza. And let's talk about the second stanza in relation to Transcendentalism. Who else do we have? Shoemaker. Shoemaker is 19th century slang for reproduction. If you make shoes, then you must have children to fill them. So there is an element of a celebration of life. Who else do we have? Woodcutter, plowboy, farm workers, don't we? Again, reproduction, planting. What time of day? All times of day. Noon, morning, sundown, he says. Noon intermission, the high point of the day, we have a break, right? This break is celebrated. The work is celebrated. The play is celebrated. All forms of American life are celebrated. Let's move on. Oh, I should take a time out and see if there's any questions. Any questions so far? Good, good, good. Okay, let's look at the rest of this poem. We also see women. Walt Whitman was inclusive. He included everyone. Oftentimes, Walt Whitman celebrates people we often don't think as being celebrated. I mentioned the carpenter and I mentioned the shipbuilder, but Whitman celebrates all people. Sometimes he celebrates thieves, sometimes he celebrates drunks, and sometimes he celebrates naughty women. But why? Because they are all part of a country's identity. Good, bad, everything in between. Transcendentalism. Look at these women, the mother, the young wife, the girl. What are they doing? The mother is singing, producing song, producing art. Poetry is just song. The young woman, the young wife is doing what? It just says work. She's producing. It doesn't say what type of work. Why? Because it doesn't matter. The girl is doing what? We have all stages of life. The young girl, the young bride, the elderly mother. Whitman has included men and their various trades and women and their various stages of life. Not only that, he includes all the times of day. The day, what belongs to the day? In other words, the day has daytime. Daytime is for work, and these people work. Whitman is celebrating their work. However, Whitman is also celebrating their joyful play at night. The party of fellows, robust, they're big guys, friendly, and they're singing. What are they doing? They're singing, producing, okay? And I want to take special note of melodious songs. Melody, okay? A melody is a series of notes, right? It's like history being recorded. And in a song, when you have 2 or 3 people sing at the same time, you have a harmony, if they're in key together. You have a harmony. And that's what America is to Walt Whitman. Now, why was Walt Whitman so pro-democracy? Why was Whitman so incredibly pro-America? During the American Civil War, Whitman was a male nurse, actually. And his most famous work, Leaves of Grass, were published in 1855. Now, here's the cool thing about Whitman. I know a lot of my students are writers, and that's one reason I'm showing this. I want to show you how to think like a writer. And one way to do that is to study Whitman. Whitman did something very interesting. He took Leaves of Grass and he published it every few years. But every time he republished the collection of poetry, he would change the poems. He would take away poems. He would add poems. He would change lines. He would add lines. He would take away lines. Why? Because he saw his book of poetry as a living document that should reflect how he felt at that moment. Transcendentalism, everything is interconnected. Okay? Let's look again at another poem of his. There he is again. This is a meaningful poem. When I heard the learned astronomer. Let me take a time out, see if I have any questions. These poetry questions can be rather difficult. Okay. Already. Now this poem is incredibly short, but one can pull quite a bit of meaning from it. Why am I showing you this? I want to show you how to pull information from literature. And then at the end, we're going to begin a composition. I want to show you how to write concretely about abstract material. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were arranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon unaccountable I became tired and sick. Till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself. In the mystical, moist night air, from time to time, looked up in perfect silence at the stars. What is happening? If you don't understand the poem, you may still enjoy the poem because it does have a natural beat and flow to it. However, it has no standardized form because it is written in free verse. Let's look at the poem. If you are in school and you have a boring teacher, hopefully I'm not too boring today. If you have a boring teacher, and in math class when I was young, the teacher would stand in front of the board and write numbers that I did not understand. And he would write symbols that I never saw before. And when he wrote them down, he told me, this is space. These are the stars. I didn't understand him. When I was a little older, I had a telescope. And with that telescope, I could see different planets and stars. That was much more interesting to me than sitting in a classroom. Now, I realize you're sitting in my class right now, watching this. The irony is not lost on me. Go experience life after this poem, after this class. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, Walt Whitman said, experience is better than book learning, okay? Traditional learning is great, but one must learn from experience. What do we see on the board? Proofs. Oh God, proofs. Do you remember proofs? Figures. And what are these? Columns. Columns are straight columns. Columns are straight lines made for support. They are rigid. They are structured, just like mathematics and physics and biology. What do you do with them? All the charts and their diagrams, and you add them, and you change them, and you measure them, and you look at them, and you analyze them. Boring. And everyone's cheering about this. Whitman does not understand. Why is everyone cheering over this boring math? He says, soon unaccountable. I like this phrase, unaccountable. In a poem, in a short poem, especially a short poem, poets work in words. Their bricks are letters. Unaccountable sounds a lot like countable. And countable reminds me of proofs, figures, columns, divide, add. Whitman here is breaking away. He's not only breaking away from the classroom, he's breaking away from poetic form. See how there's a natural break here in the poem? And then we go to the second half of the poem, where Whitman makes his step away from the crowd. Till rising, almost like from the dead. He uses the word rising on purpose, almost like the sun also rises, doesn't it? Look at the next verb, gliding. Why am I talking about this? This is the level of attention you should pay to a text. If you have time and you have the preconceived knowledge, you can add your context clues together and pull meaning out of a text in a relatively short amount of time. Okay? Gliding. Gliding sounds almost smooth, doesn't it? Well, when one stands up in class, one should not make much noise, correct? He's also going fast because he's bored. I hope you're not running away. He said he wandered off by himself, doesn't he? In traditional psychology, they tell us that for a person to achieve enlightenment, it is very, very common for that person to step away from the group. If you look at Native American cultures, Native Americans, when they achieved enlightenment, the shaman would go away from the tribe. If you go to South America, the shaman goes away from the tribe, sometimes to an island by himself. In Australia, the child will go into a cave, and when he comes out, he is reborn a man. Isolation is where we do our best thinking. Even in the Bible, Moses goes up to Mount, can't remember the name, a mountain, and gets the 10 Commandments and comes down, right? He goes away from society. Whitman is aware of this. He uses the word mystical. So now the poem takes on a very ghostly, not ghostly, abstract quality. Okay? Till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the midnight moist night air, in the mystical moist. I like that, mystical, moist. You can almost hear the hum of the universe. Night is always a little bit more interesting. Night is the time spooky things happen, but it's also the time of rebirth, because after night comes daytime, and then night, day, time to time, he says. And then what happens? He doesn't say anything. Oftentimes, the religious experience is beyond words. I've never had a religious experience myself, but my friends who have told me it is very quiet. It is loudly quiet. Perfect silence, he says, at the stars. Why is he looking at the stars? Because that is the answer. The answer is not found in a book. Books are our guides to life. Life is the teacher, okay? That is what Whitman is saying. Cool. I think you're beginning to understand how Whitman pulls from nature, everyday life, the city, and different Americans to create his own unique poetry that is, like America, unique and inclusive at its best. Let's look at one more, maybe two more if we have time. A noiseless, patient spider. You know a spider, right? And you know patient, calmly waiting, okay? This poem is again inspirational. In life, you must make choices. You must. The worst thing you can do is not make a choice. Bad choices are merely mistakes. No choices can be disastrous. A noiseless, patient spider. I marked where on a little promontory it stood isolated. Promontory. It's a little hill, but I guess a spider-sized hill, so it's like a little rock. Marked how to explore the vacant, vast surroundings. Marked. When a poet repeats a word, take note. So the spider's on top of this rock. The spider's looking around. You are the spider. I am the spider. This is an allegory, a metaphor. It launched forth filament outside of itself, ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly speeding them. Now the spider takes the role of the creator. You are the creator. If you go to school, you write. If you're an artist, you paint. If you're a musician, you play. This is the filament. Do you understand? The filament of life. You are the spider on top of the rock, spitting your little web out. Your creation. How does one build a web? Well, first, like Spider-Man or woman, you can shoot your little web out, and then you start to build once it hits. If it hits the ceiling, then I can start building my web from the ceiling. See the metaphor for life? You build with the material you are given, and you must build your life with that material, with that filament. If you don't know what filament is, it's just spider string, sticky, sticky spider string. How do you unwind it? Tirelessly, ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly. To achieve your goals, you must do it nonstop. Why? Well, sometimes your metaphorical spider web will not stick. Let's look at our second half. The second half of Whitman's poems oftentimes contain a turn. Within this turn, that's the key to understanding the poem. It's usually in the second stanza. And you, O my soul, where you stand, surrounded, detached, in measureless oceans of space. You are the spider on the rock. You have parents and you have teachers, but at the end of the day, you must make decisions about your own life. You will be in charge of your own life one day. So you must spin those spider webs now, so you can be sufficient when you are not under the care of your parents or teachers. Surrounded by what? Oceans of space. You have ample opportunity, but you must be detached. What is he doing? Carelessly musing. Musing. Musing, amusing, museum, all come from this word. Inspiring. So he's carelessly inspired. In other words, it's almost like shooting out like a fountain. It's just nonstop inspiration. But what if I fail? Then you fail. Hopefully it's not at school. Venturing, musing, venturing, adventuring. So this little poem is not just about a little spider on top of a rock shooting webs everywhere. The poem is about we as human beings and creative entities fulfilling our desires. Okay? To fill your desire, you must create, you must find a stable environment to create in. I'll continue. Venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them. Whitman, like the spider, like us, we're connecting these ideas. In the very poem, we're connecting ideas. Does that make sense? Very interesting. Till the bridge you will need be formed, till the ductile anchor hold, till the gossamer means fine, thin, thread you catch somewhere. Oh, my soul. So the spider becomes a metaphor for our creative spirit. Okay. Another inspiring poem from Whitman. Let's look at a few more. And then I will show you how to write how to begin to write concretely about very abstract material. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Oh, we still have about 25 minutes. Lots of time. Song of Myself. I want you to notice what I said about Whitman earlier. Song of Myself contains many, many poems. And these are the poems that he would oftentimes alter or change. Okay. Song of Myself includes these lists Whitman is often famous for. Why? These lists are inclusive. They include everyone from animals to humans, all races and religions, to even all the different elements in the universe, like water and air. Okay. The wild gander, a duck, leads his flock through the cold night. You honk. You know how a goose sounds, a honk. He says, and sounds it down to me like an invitation. The pert may suppose its meaning, but I, listening close, find its purpose and place it up there toward the wintry sky. What's happening? He looks up and he sees some geese. He sees a goose. And the goose says, you honk? But Whitman hears this as the voice of God. It's not just a goose. You honk is the sound of God. Now, this is very different than the Christian tradition, where the voice of God sounds like the voice of God. In the Latin tradition, God is big and scary and speaks Latin, right? He tells you things like, beware, and thou shalt. Here, the concept of divine force is reduced to a goose. But in that goose, Whitman sees all life interconnected. Another list. The sharp-hoofed mouse of the north, the cat on the house sill, the chickadee, the prairie dog. You can almost see him like starting to make a list. Like, here we go. Why does he do this? In the Odyssey by Homer, I'm reading the Odyssey with one of my students, by the way. The Odyssey by Homer, the ancient Greek epic, inspired Whitman greatly. And in the Odyssey, the cornerstone of Western literature, you will see these long lists of everything that Odysseus includes on his ship. You will see long lists of all the people on Odysseus's ship and where they came from. So these lists in poetic form reflect the inclusive nature of America. The brood, the leader of the grunting sow as they tug her teats. So a sow is a pig. The brood means the babies. The brood of the turkey hen. And she with her half spread wings. I see them and myself, the same old law. In the turkey, in the pig, in the prairie dog, in the cat, in the moose, Whitman sees himself. Have you ever watched The Lion King? It's like The Lion King. It's the circle of life. The deer eats the grass. The lion eats the deer. The grass and the fungus eat the predator. Okay? The press of my foot to earth springs 100 affections. So his life is almost electric. Where he steps down, flowers bust out of the ground. And they tell him, you are doing a bad job, Walt. You're not explaining this right. See, the press of my foot to the earth springs 100 affections, 100 feelings. They scorn the best I can do to relate them. It is difficult to put the unexpressive into words. We must rely on metaphor. I am enamored of growing outdoors. Let's start breaking this apart. Enamored, love, growing. We have all this nature imagery like plants or like a little kid maturing, okay? Of men that live among cattle or taste of the ocean or woods. Here we go, another list. Of builders and steerers of ships and welders of axes and mauls and drivers of horses. I can eat and sleep with them week in and week out. So now he says all these beautiful people, these men are big and strong. The women are beautiful. He's saying all this about America. Okay? Men on cattle, these are like cowboys, right? Taste of the ocean, sailors. He couldn't just say sailor. That would be bad poetry. Woodsmen, okay? I eat and sleep with them. What happens? Eat and sleep, cycles again. Whitman loves cycles. Why? The earth runs on cycles. Let's conclude this poem. What is commonest, cheapest, nearest, easiest, is me. He capitalizes the M. Oftentimes, Christians and Jews will capitalize the he in the Bible for him, God, Yahweh, Jesus, Yesu. However, here Whitman capitalizes himself. Why? He is that divine force, he believes. Oh, excuse me. I bumped the mute button. Me, going in for my chances, spending for vast returns, adorning myself to bestow myself on the first that will take me, not asking the sky to come down to my goodwill, scattering it freely forever. He does not ask heaven to come down to him. He goes up to heaven. He observes. He doesn't have to go up to heaven. Heaven is right here, is Whitman's idea. So Whitman claims in nature, one can find his or her self. Okay. Let me check and see if there's any questions very quickly. Good, good, good. Good, good, good. All right, let's go. Let's talk about, I think we have time for one more, and then I will show you how to write about abstract material, and then I will take a few questions, okay? Here's Whitman again. Oddly enough, Walt Whitman is buried in a very, very strange tomb. I'll show you. It's in New Jersey. It's kind of creepy looking, isn't it? Anyway, inside of the tomb, there are flowers that grow. And I ate one of the flowers. Why? I ate one, it was nasty, by the way. It tasted like dirty cigarettes. Ugh. Anyway, I ate it because Whitman believed in this idea of continuing on with nature. His body in the ground, flowers grew out of the ground. It's that Lion King stuff again, right? Let's look at one more poem. Bivouac. Bivouac's a funny word, and it's never going to show up unless you take a test. I promise. Nobody uses this word anymore. But you need to know what it is, because it shows up in a lot of tests. It's a war themed. It just means an encampment. It's a temporary encampment. So it's when soldiers kind of sit down and rest for a little bit, you see? Here's a guy with a motorcycle. Yeah, like this. A little bivouac. Whoa. That's crazy. Look at that. Anyway. This is about war. But remember, Whitman does not celebrate war. Instead, he eschews it. By the bivouac's fitful flame, the procession winding around me, solemn and sweet and slow. But first I note, so there's an encampment winding around. The tents of the sleeping army, the fields and woods' dim outline, the darkness lit by spots of kindled fire, the silence, like phantom far or near on occasion figure moving. Imagine you are in the woods and you see a small army stop to rest. When you look at them, you see dark blobs, right? These little people moving around between the trees. You see a little fire start. You hear silence because they're an army. They don't want to be loud. And you hear they're almost like ghosts and phantoms. Why? Sleep. This is a very, very mystical poem. Darkness, fire, dimness, phantoms. The shrubs and trees. As I lift my eyes, they seem to be stealthily watching me. Who is they? They is the trees and shrubs. So now The watcher of nature is being watched by nature. Nature itself takes on a personality and watches Whitman himself. But why? While wind and procession thoughts, oh tender and wondrous thoughts of life and death. So Whitman is staring at the soldiers, and the trees stare back at Whitman. And the trees are staring back at him. Here we have another cycle, right? Whitman realizes this. He realizes that soldiers do what? Soldiers fight. And sometimes what happens when they fight? They die. Tender, wondrous, life and death. Of home and the past and loved. So what are these soldiers thinking about? They're probably thinking about life and death too, because they will be the ones shot at. And then when you know you're going to die, what do you think about? You think about home. You think about mom. You think about old love, okay? Old girlfriends, right? And of those that are far away. A solemn and slow procession there as I sit on the ground by the bivac's fitful flame. So if you can imagine, fitful, a fit is when you shake, right? So the fire is twitching and moving around. Very, very interesting poem. So now, oh, excuse me, just a moment while I sneeze. I have returned. Let's talk about this. I gave you a brief introduction to Transcendentalism. And remember, Transcendentalism is this idea that God is the larger interconnectivity of life. This larger connection between all of us is God. But how do we write about this? You're saying to me, Malone, I have a test. And on this test, I'm scared. There might not be Whitman on that test, but there will be abstract writing. For me, if I am writing, I always do an outline, especially if the material is abstract. I want you to remember, usually speaking, not always, but on the PSAT and the SAT test, if the passage is somewhat simple, the questions will be more difficult. Okay? If the passage is more difficult, usually, not always, the questions can be simpler. But that doesn't help you with the writing section. So let's pretend they want you to compose an essay, but you only have 50 minutes. What do you do? When you're writing about poetry or abstract material, I think it's easier to brainstorm and write your main points down first. Okay? So let's say, please describe a theme in Whitman's poetry. Please describe a common theme found in Walt Whitman's poetry. Let's just pretend your teacher sends this question to you. What do? You brainstorm. You write down your main thoughts. Period. Now, what are some of his themes, right? So we have, first, we have our introduction. Introduction. This is where we keep our what? Our thesis statement. There's no U in introduction after the O. Thesis. What does thesis mean? It comes from a Greek word meaning I believe. So thesis here simply means what you are saying. Okay? Next, you have your body paragraphs. And then in your body paragraph, I want you to be sure you should have something that definitely relates to the thesis. So in every body sentence, you need a topic. Every body paragraph, you need a topic sentence. Okay? And these need to be different. Then you need a conclusion. Let's talk about these. Okay? Your body paragraphs and topic sentences usually should explore a certain aspect of everything you're discussing. Okay? So for example, we could say in our first topic sentence, notice I'm writing my topic sentences first. I'm not working on my thesis yet. Because this is abstract, we need to begin simply and then build from there. Whitman celebrates the individual, right? What else does he celebrate? Nature, the love of nature is a common theme in Whitman's poetry. Good. One more theme. Whitman's poetry is often inclusive to all life. Now, whoops, typo. I have these big fat sausage fingers. They're difficult to type with. Now, so we don't get bored, here's the part you're looking for. When you brainstorm, I know teachers tell you to do it and you don't want to do it, but do it because it helps you organize your thoughts. But what am I talking about? We have our themes, but we don't have a thesis yet. Now, write your thesis after you're brainstorming because it's much easier to include all of your ideas in your thesis. Think of it as trying to put a shirt on. Your thesis is your coat, and you has to fit over all of your other topic sentences. Okay? When you write about abstract ideas, you must be logical and concrete. I think I froze for a moment. I said, if you are writing about abstract art or poetry or literature, you must write concretely. What is our thesis? Walt Whitman's poetry contains many universal themes, such as a celebration of the body, we'll say individual, individual, a love of nature, and an inclusive spirit. Yes, yes. Don't forget to proofread. Walt Whitman's poetry contains many universal themes. Okay, so we have this nice, tight thesis, but what makes it a good thesis? It's a good thesis because it includes all the information we are going to discuss in the body paragraph. Do you remember at the beginning of this class? I said, we will do this: A, B, C, beginning, middle, end. Your thesis sentence contains all of those aspects in your paragraph, body essay. Look, celebration, that aligns with body paragraph 2. Love of nature aligns with paragraph 3, etc., etc. What do you put in the conclusion? Don't put any new ideas in there. Restate your thesis. Okay? The best advice I can give you is write your thesis last. Okay? I always did it when I was in college because I was lazy. It's easier than wasting time trying to write this thesis and then shoving 2 ideas together. It's much easier to write your thesis last. Hey, Let's talk about questions. I said a lot of stuff. Kay, are you there? Any questions?
Hey, Evan.
Hey, buddy, what's up?
I'm great. And you?
I'm okay, Brandon. Thank you. What's your
So,
question?
yeah, so my question is, Whitman has wrote a lot of poems, but I have
Mhm.
a question which is about, does he have anything to say about the society when he writes so many poems about that, and what he was trying to say and what he was trying to produce?
Good question, Brandon. I think Walt Whitman was trying to say, America, we can all do better. We can all get along. Remember, Walt Whitman was greatly inspired by the American Civil War. The war is oftentimes called brother against brother, and that is true. Country members fought against each other, and that broke Whitman's heart because it tore our nation in half. Whitman believed America could be the best of all countries because so his message is that America is like this super country that pulls from everywhere at its best. And the Civil War broke his heart, so his message was one of unity and a special message of togetherness. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure, Brandon. I want to say thank you to Kay and thank you for Ivy again for letting me talk about poetry and movies. And I hope everybody has a good day and joins me next time, okay?